Thank you all for being here. Very excited to kick off our second virtual info session for the 2025 Lilly Grand Challenge. So as I promised, I did bring some slides. I will make them short so we can get to the exciting part of hearing about Jack's science and his experience in the program. Can everyone see my screen? Great. So, thank you guys for being here. My name is Oliver. I am one of the co-founders of Nucleate and currently work in a full-time capacity as our Chief Operating Officer. I have been very involved in the Lilly relationship and the Grand Challenge since the beginning. And it's also great to see that we have a couple of our Nucleate leadership members, including Priya and probably some other people on the call that I can't see on my screen, who are also quite involved in supporting this challenge. So, the Grand Challenge, this is something we've done now for 2 years in a row. There'll be another one next year, and hopefully this trend will sort of continue indefinitely. It's a 2-day event at Lilly headquarters that we organize as a partnering event so that you can go to Lilly HQ, meet with their scientists, their top executives, talk about your science, and hopefully out of that, create a business relationship or a mentor relationship that's going to help, further develop your company. In addition to the opportunity that you have to go to Lilly, all expenses paid for this 2-day partnering event and network with all of their senior leadership, one team of the 10 that will accept will walk away with a $100,000 grant. So this means $100,000 non-dilutive funding, no strings attached. The money actually comes from Nucleate, so we're the one that transfers it. The only conditions we have on the money is that you give us an update report 6 and 12 months out. And we can actually hold this money for you if you don't have a company for up to 12 months. So if you're an early stage company, early stage project and you haven't incorporated yet, but you anticipate that you'll be able to incorporate and spin out in the next 6 to 8 months, you could be awarded this money and Nucleate will hold it for you until your company incorporates, at which time we transfer it to you. There is no IP rights, there is no right of first refusal, there is no need for you to transfer data or anything proprietary to Lilly. Nucleate is kind of working as a neutral third party broker here. And that is why, because I always say this since the first question I get asked, but it is true, $100,000, no strings attached, money comes from Nucleate and it is awarded to the team that Lilly thinks best is positioned to address the Grand Challenge topic that year. So this year's topic is a focus on women's health. However, it's actually much broader than that. Each year we choose a theme to really sort of focus the innovation call on. But Lilly obviously has a very expansive portfolio, a lot of indication areas of interest. So this year's Grand Challenge, oops. Yeah, so what are the Lilly Grand Challenge tracks this year? So as I said, women's health is kind of the new track that we've added, and women's health is defined very broadly. People hear women's health, they think fertility, reproductive health. Now, obviously, that is one of the three subtracks that we have within the women's health main category. But also, women are affected in increased severity in a number of different disease indications. For example, autoimmune diseases, like 80% of the patient population in a large proportion of autoimmune diseases are women. Same for cardiometabolic health. Women generally have poorer outcomes. So the women's health track actually includes three subtracks on autoimmune disease, cardiometabolic health, and reproductive health. So very massive scope here for what we would consider women's health and what would be eligible for the challenge. In addition, Lilly has a big focus on genetic medicine, and their genetic medicine division is actually where the sort of relationship with Lilly and Nucleate originated. So, in homage to that, we always have a genetic medicine track in our challenge, and this year is no different. And the three sub tracks for genetic medicine are really focused on novel delivery technologies, regenerative medicine, and neuroscience. And I would say, for example, if you're developing like a new CRISPR editor or a new ASO, that's not necessarily within these three spaces. It is still genetic medicine. So any genetic medicine modality as well is eligible to apply. So as I mentioned, quite a broad scope here for the challenge this year. I'm so sorry for some reason the way this slide deck was presented. We're probably going to continue seeing that. So sorry about that. Yeah, so a big question we get is this just for women's health? No. Anyone with technology that touches any of the main or subtracks is eligible to apply. Okay, so what is the Lilly Grant Challenge? I sort of talked about this in the beginning, but it's a 2-day event where 10 teams will have the chance to connect with senior leadership. You'll also get to learn a lot about the company and take a tour of their sort of massive HQ. So this is a photo from the first year that we went standing in front of the recreation of the original Eli Lilly and Company building established in 1876. So they actually recreated this building essentially brick by brick from photos of it in the 1800s and built a replica version of it that has a lot of the original manufacturing equipment from the 1800s on their site. So it's a really great opportunity to explore not only the science of Lilly, but also the culture and really engage with the folks that are going to help you drive continued interest in conversations from a collaboration perspective. Okay, so who is eligible and how do you apply? Any technology at any stage with a broad application to women's health or genetic medicine is eligible to apply. The application is very simple. It's an Airtable form, take you maybe 15, 20 minutes to fill out. If you are an Activator alumni, feel free to reuse your program materials. You already applied to the Activator. Many of the questions are the same. Importantly, no affiliation with Nucleate is required to apply. We will take anyone that has good technology. You do not have to be affiliated with Nucleate. International teams are also welcome to apply this year, which is a change from prior years. What's the catch? There is no catch. Materials submitted are non-confidential. Lilly has no rights to your IP. All expenses are paid for the trip, and the $100,000 grant comes with no conditions and is transferred from Nucleate. So why should you apply? In addition to the opportunity to win the award, what we hear from folks that have applied the challenge is that the networking opportunity and the exposure that you have to really high up decision makers in Eli Lilly's corporate structure is the value of attending the Grand Challenge. And I'm sure that Jack can maybe speak a little bit to that later on as well. Okay, so when is the event? Who can attend? And what's the agenda? So the event this year is going to be the 3rd and 4th of September at Lilly headquarters in Indianapolis. Here's a great shot of us from, I think this was last year, underneath the, in the room where all the presentations are given. And just to give you a flavor of some of the people that are like at this event, Andrew Adams, who is the sort of CSO of their Gen Med division, is always there. And then there's a number of people from all different business units at Lilly, Gateway Labs, their venture arm. Last year, we did a focus in neuroscience, so there were a lot of neuroscience people there, as well as genetic medicine. Quick recap of last year's Grand Challenge. We had about 128 applications representing 72 institutions. 53% of these were external to Nucleate. So again, you don't need to be affiliated to apply. And we see that a lot of people that apply are not affiliated. So, tell your friends if you have other folks working in the space, like we want as many people to apply as possible. Only 31% of those companies were incorporated and 86 were incorporating within 24 months. So again, within that trend of sort of early innovation, we had a range of technologies last year, people that were still in the lab, people that are just incorporated but raised no money, people that incorporated and raised 5 million, people that were in the clinic with an asset. So that's like the full range of technology that Lilly is excited to engage with. And of course, we ended with 10 semifinal teams. So I'm going to stop there for a second. I think we can hold our questions until the ends because it'll also be really, I think, helpful to hear about Jack's experience, and some of those anecdotes may answer some of your questions. But this is, it's my pleasure to introduce to you guys Jack Stahl from the RNA Inc. He was the 2024 Grand Challenge winner, and in fact, I should say Dr. Stahl, as I believe he just defended his PhD last week. So Jack, why don't you go ahead? I'll stop sharing my screen, and it would be great if you could introduce yourself and tell people a little bit about your science and sort of your path to the Grand Challenge.
That's right. Hello, everybody, and thanks so much, Oliver. Yeah, I'm Jack Stahl, and I just graduated with a PhD in neuroscience last week from the University of Miami, and I'm now the Chief Scientific Officer at DRNA, which is a company I co-founded during my PhD. I focus a lot on drug discovery during my PhD, but at the company, we primarily focus on developing multi-targeting oligonucleotide therapeutics, so DNA or RNA-based therapeutics, primarily for neurological disorders, but we're also partnering with other companies to use this platform technology for other types of disease as well.
Amazing. And do you want to talk a little bit about sort of how you heard about the Grand Challenge and what the process was like to apply?
Yeah, yeah. Unlike probably a lot of you, I pretty much had my head down in the lab, being a scientist, and I wasn't so entrepreneurial during my PhD. But one of my friends who was getting her PhD in the same lab as me was very heavily involved with Nucleate. She told me about the competition, and she knew what I was working on in lab would be a good fit for the competition. So at the time, I was interested in forming a company with my PI, and we had actually incorporated a company just sort of as a shell of a company for any upcoming technology that may come from my project. So the timing was perfect to apply for the competition. But I really was just a PhD student working on a scientific idea with no real established company at the time.
Amazing. And what was it like when you actually like filled out the application? Was it hard? How long did it take you approximately?
I mean, I went back and forth with some of the other co-founders and my PI. Um, but no, it's short. I think it was something like 10 slides max or something like that. So less than a week, I would say. But if you have everything ready to go, yeah, you can probably finish it within 30 minutes if you really want to.
Great. And I mean, can you maybe just reflect a little bit on sort of like what the actual event was like? Can you tell people, what the agenda was like, some of the people that you met, what you found to be most useful or unique about the challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm really not one to exaggerate, but attending that event really was life-changing for me. Uh, as I mentioned, I really, we're probably all scientists, so we know how to plan experiments, how to come up with ideas, but like Oliver was alluding to earlier, sort of how do you take that idea and advance it to being clinically viable, or actually how to build a company is something I did not have knowledge about. So to me, the most valuable part of the event was the fact that you have experts from every single discipline at Eli Lilly all together in the same room. And there also was a session where you sort of speed date with all the different departments. So you can spend some time with the business development people at Eli Lilly, some time with the venture people, and you can talk to them and really learn a lot beyond the science from all types of experts.
Amazing. And I guess, obviously, so I like backing up for a second, obviously you won the grand prize. And that was very exciting. If you hadn't won the grand prize, do you still feel like it would have been worth going to the event?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. A lot of the Nucleate events are great for sort of learning about entrepreneurship and biotech. But again, this one with sort of all the experts from Eli Lilly, the clear global leader, um, very valuable to sort of become acquainted with those people and hear, um, I guess, from their perspective, the best way to go about advancing an initial idea or an early startup.
Great. We've got a great question from the audience here from Bolika. She wants to know how much preliminary data you had for the competition. So I guess
Mhm.
like at the time that you applied, what had you shown? What had you not shown? And then I've got a good follow-up question for that actually afterwards, but I'll let you respond.
Yep. Yep. So at the time, again, we have a platform technology for making multi-targeting oligonucleotides. So I had a few separate projects where we were using multi-targeting oligonucleotides and this new technology. So a few separate sort of proof of concept projects, but each one was only at in vitro stage. So we did not even have in vivo data. And when I was first, mentioned or when I became aware of this competition, I almost thought it's not even worth applying because I only have in vitro data, but I did have sort of robust in vitro data. Um, so I think that that can be sufficient. I know some of the other finalists did not even have in vitro data, and then there was a different finalist, Oliver, if you remember, that had clinical data. They were already in the clinic
Mhm.
with their lead molecule. So when I heard that presentation, I sort of thought this is a done deal. And this person already has promising clinical data with their lead molecule. But um, I think having sufficient proof of concept data at the in vitro level to suggest that it's promising is good enough.
Great. Yeah, and just to respond to a question from Dub Therapeutics, and I think, what you said touches on that pretty nicely. What companies' technologies would be considered too advanced for this opportunity? Lilly has messaged to us that they are really excited about seeing the whole range of what is out there. And now, obviously, for companies that are, later stage of development, it's likely that Lilly may have already engaged with them in some capacity. But sometimes what I find is Lilly is so huge, the business units often don't talk to each other, right? So maybe someone on the venture team engaged with this person, but they didn't get the chance to engage with a scientist, right? And at this event, they're all in the same room. So you have a very unique opportunity. I think like anything that would be considered too advanced for this opportunity, I would say would be like if someone's walking around with like a drug approval, probably too advanced. If someone's in the clinic, as we've said, Lilly is excited to engage with those teams as well. If you have very early stage in vitro data, they're excited. If you have an idea and even less than that, like some amount of data, that's where things start to get challenging. But as Jack can mention, there were, at least one team that was in that category last year, and that was driven just by what they were working on was a huge problem that was on strategy for Lilly. So they really wanted to engage with that team and understand a little bit more deeply kind of what the technology was, how they could potentially plug it into their pipeline. Yes. Okay. Are healthcare providers disqualified from participating? Yes. So you actually cannot attend the event if you're a healthcare provider, but you can still apply and send a different team member. So sorry, I got distracted by the chat. Circling back, Jack, another question that I have for you is, so when you applied initially, you were kind of early stage in vitro proof of concept, some experiments. You thought, maybe I shouldn't, is this worth applying to? You took a flyer, you applied for it, you went to the event, you were like, oh, this is a great event, but also like, how could I win this with a clinical stage company there? And then you won the award. So that was pretty great. What have you what did you use the money for, or what do you plan to use the money for? And yeah, what is that going to sort of help you do? How is the award going to actually help you advance the science and the company?
Yeah, so incorporating the company, we had already done just before the competition. However, our IP it was still with the university, so we had to license that IP to the company. To do that, we had to put together a bunch of term sheets and full licensing agreements. And as you mentioned, we had to use a legal team. The lawyers will defer some costs, but they also like if you can pay them a little bit. Um, Plus, we also have been developing partnerships with other companies that also require term sheets and licensing agreements. So a lot of it, or a portion of it, is being used to pay some lawyers to kind of advance the corporate side of the company. But then we also reserve some for travel, to go to conferences, to promote the company, and of course, establish some collaborators. And then lastly, we ultimately are using some to run some experiments at a new lab space, which we identified separate from the university.
Very cool. And I think for you and your company, what would you identify as kind of your next like major value inflection milestone? This could be on the business side, on the science side, or maybe an example sort of on both sides, one of each. And sort of what progress have you guys made since last year's challenge? I mean, obviously you noted a couple of things there, licensing from the university, getting some agreements together, term sheets, et cetera. But maybe if you could speak a little bit to sort of what's on the horizon for you and, where you've come from relative to last year.
Yeah, we're really interested in getting robust in vivo data for multiple projects. So we've sort of been advancing not just one lead program, but multiple in-house, and then we've also established two separate partnerships with different companies where we're creating some multi-targeting molecules for other indications. With each of these, for some of our in-house projects, we are initiating in vivo studies now. And then with the partnership deals, those will also generate some in vivo data for different indications. So that's, as a scientist, what I'm primarily excited about. But also each of these partnerships that we're forming come with some upfront payments for licensing. So um, we've kind of used the initial 100,000 in an award, converted it into IP for the company, and then also new partnership deals that are generating more revenue, so we can generate more data than we'd be able to with just the original 100K.
Amazing. Awesome. Is there anything else, Jack, that you would like to highlight or leave or advice for the audience? And then I think we can pass it over to some questions from their end.
Um, no, I think going back to your question about, if you had won, would it still be a, a useful, or if you hadn't won, would it still be a useful event to attend? My advice would be if you do attend this event, really focus on learning from the event rather than focusing on winning or performing well. So, ask questions, even if they expose how naive you are. Um, I feel from the time of the event till now, I've advanced exponentially, and it really was sort of initiated by that event. And then as for the applications, you have the common things that you want to include in a pitch deck, like your mission, your team, and your background, the unmet need you're addressing, intellectual property, competition. But I think another thing that's very important to include in the application is how the award money will actually advance your science. For a clinical stage company, maybe the 100K wouldn't really move the needle so much. But if you're an early stage academic startup, that 100K can obviously be useful. And I think it's a good idea to include how helpful that will be and how you will plan to use that money. So that's something I would advise to include in your pitch decks.
Sorry, I was muted. Awesome. We're going to open it up to the audience now before and there's two questions in the chat that I'll throw at you, Jack, and then folks can feel free to unmute themselves and go ahead and ask or continue putting them in the chat. So one question was how many scientific advisors you had in total. Did you have an advisor for each category, such as neuroscience, drugs, et cetera? So I guess speaking a little bit to the strategy for building a scientific advisory board for your company, do you have advice for folks on the call?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of ever changing. We're still adding advisors. When I started off, it was just my PI and myself. Um, as soon as we won the competition, we brought on sort of a CBO, CFO to help with some of the more administrative roles. And then depending on the project that we're working on, we like to have sort of an expert from each field. Um, but when I first started off, it was just me and my PI at the time, who he had some experience with some startups himself, which I was very lucky to have him on my side. But I did not go into the competition with a huge advisory board or a bunch of experts to help out.
Right. And then a question again from Malika. So she's asking, even though you had in vitro data, how did you define how much targets you had or what those targets were in the pitch deck? How did you manage between maintaining the confidentiality but still giving enough during the competition? Do you have some ideas and methods regarding this? So I guess speaking to how to give a non-confidential pitch effectively, so that people are excited, but you're not giving away things that are confidential.
Yeah, for us, we weren't concerned about disclosing the targets. That wasn't really the proprietary nature of our technology. It was more so focused on the chemistry of our molecules and our platform. So we ultimately masked the chemistry and just said, oligonucleotide A or B or linker A, linker B. Um, so for us, we weren't concerned about disclosing the target, but I'm sure it wouldn't be a problem if you want to say target A or target B. Um, and I think the separate part of that project was made, or that question was,
I think you answered the question, and there's a follow-up as well. And I think, this is one of the things too that for a lot of like earlier stage folks in academia, we really try to help with during the activator program is really giving people advice and helping counsel them on how to pitch your idea, non-confidentially, right?
and also you can talk to your tech transfer office at your university as well. Show them what you plan to present ahead of time, and get advice from them. Are we giving away some proprietary nature of this technology, or is this okay to say it like this? I think they can be very useful since that's their job.
Right. And speaking to like what the secret sauce is, right? Like for your technology, right? It's really the chemistry, right? And it's the ability to do multiple things at once with a single API, right? And the chemistry of how you modify your nucleotides, that's really what's protectable, and that's really the secret sauce, right? So, and in terms of, when you're targeting Alzheimer's, right? It's like we all know the targets like amyloid beta, tau, tangles, right? So the pitch that I remember seeing when he first applied, just to go a little bit deeper into that, was basically like we're targeting this disease, like we know what the targets are. Here is a graph showing that with an oligonucleotide that we modified, we can hit two targets. We can do up, we can do down, right? And here's the picomolar dose curve, right? All of that is not, that's all non-confidential, right? It would be, what would be confidential is if you had a slide outlining, here's how we do the modifications, right? That's really the protectable piece that you can't talk about, but you can show your data and blind it. And that's all that people need to like, get excited about a technology. And I remember in your deck, it was just like you had like an oligo and you just had different colors at different positions. You were like, look, they're
Mhm.
modified, right? Don't ask me
That's
how. If
right.
you want to know, sign a CDA. But no one's going to sign a CDA until they get excited about what you can do with the modified oligos. And that's really what you focused your pitch on. And I think that's what got Lilly excited. Um, okay, so I want to go to Akita. Someone has their hand raised. Bio Deliverer. Yeah, go ahead.
So Great talk, and I just wanted to ask if so you did have a platform technology, and how did you decide between platform technology to which targets should you present and not? For example, in my case, we have a platform technology too, but it's based more in cancer. So like we can target different types of cancer. Sometimes we focus more in like some people tell us that to focus more in one type of cancer, for example, breast,
The one that you have data.
the one that you have the most data, but I also like to focus a little bit more on what we're working next, because we're at the same time we are working on some other ones, but like we have more data in just one.
Yeah. So obviously, whichever you have your best data for. But the way that I sort of structured it is we have this overall platform technology, and then there are a few examples of the platform working for a couple of different indications. So obviously, you want to show data that looks decent. But my advice would be to include as much as you can, and maybe just only touch on it very briefly. I think for scientists, we always want to show so many figures. We want 5 slides per indication, but if you can sort of just get to the main point and summarize each target or each indication into one slide, then you can probably include several. And yeah, I would include many to show that the platform can be used in multiple different ways.
Thank you.
Great question. I think we had another one in the chat from Manny. Did the relationship with Lilly end with the award winning of the grant, or was there any follow-up where the relationship evolved just beyond the financial award, like access to experts at Lilly, potential partnership discussions, etc.?
No, yeah, it definitely did not end. Lilly was great at following up. We've had several virtual sort of follow-up discussions. We've also run into each other at conferences, and of course, at this point, we're friends and colleagues. I will say, the question that Lilly asked afterwards is, what can we do for you? Like, do you need some access to some resources that we uniquely have, or are you looking for an investment? So we've sort of gotten advice from some of their top scientists. We've had continuous discussions with some of their venture team on follow-up investments as well. So it continues.
Awesome. So this is another question from Malika. What was the reason for you to obtain the lab space besides the home lab? Is this something Eli Lilly wants to know about the company, or how they can achieve the milestones without the institution? Just a brief note. Don't think that has anything to do with Lilly. I think that, when you incorporate your entity and you have money, it makes financial sense to move to a new lab space so that all the work that you do there is assigned to the company and you do not longer have to license additional IP generated from the university. But feel free to correct me if I'm mistaken, Jack, as to why that she moved.
That's exactly right. Anything you do at the university, they're ultimately going to have the IP. So if you want to generate IP for the company, you need to perform those experiments and conceive those ideas separate from the university.
Great. We had a question from Maria. This one's, I think, for eligibility. Small molecules repurposed for new indications in wound healing. Is that eligible for regenerative medicine route, or eligibility limited to gene therapies? So eligibility is generally limited to gene therapies in that category, except of course from the concept of delivery, right? Like the delivery thing is pretty broad. That being said, if you submit an application, like we will review it and Lilly will review it as well, as long as it's not like word salad and doesn't have any data. So I would still encourage you to apply, but that does seem like a little bit maybe off scope for the gen med aspect. Great. Do we have any other questions for Jack about his experience, about his science, about his background from the audience?
I see one in the chat about filing a provisional patent ahead of the
Ooh,
challenge or
good catch.
after. So I did file the provisional just prior to the challenge. Actually, it was maybe about the week before actually sharing it. But again, this is all non-confidential, so you can mask any type of detail. That way, you're not making your proprietary technology public.
Great. Dub Therapeutics, how long did it take to receive the funding once the announcement was made?
Ooh, sort of surprisingly quick. Maybe within 2 or 3 months. But of course, you have to take the time to actually set up a bank account for the company if you don't have one already. So I think that part actually maybe even took us longer than it did to receive the money, but it's pretty quick within a few months.
Brilliant. Bilal asked me, are genetically modified regenerative cell therapies for neurology within scope? The answer is yes. Caitlin said, does Eli Lilly have public statements about their focus or strategy so we can align their platform technology targets to their strategy? Yes, it should be all on their website. And you can also look at their pipeline, recent M&A acquisition or licensing deals that they've done to kind of understand like what's on and off strategy for them. Although it is, always a bit of a challenge to understand that. And I think that's one of the reasons why, coming to the challenge and really talking with people can be super useful. Okay, we have another question from BioDelivero.
Yeah, so my question is, how did this challenge help more about like having more investment in the future, or like did it help you raise more money? Or yeah, or maybe not the challenge itself, but like connections there, I guess.
I mean, to raise more money in the future, the award money definitely helped us to have everything corporate ready to go. So that way, when we talk to new partners, so we actually, the economy is a little rough right now, and biotech investments have sort of slowed. So we're kind of focusing on partnership and licensing agreements rather than direct investments. So I can't really speak to direct investments as of now, but I will say the award and also a lot of what we learned from the competition sort of helped us be more polished. And I don't believe we would have gotten these licensing deals without that.
Thank you.
And then also these are leading experts in the field, so listen to the advice that they give you and sort of incorporate it into your company as well, and that can help you with future investments.
Totally. Malika had a question. What was one of the toughest questions you were asked during the competition that you wished you could have looked into before the competition?
Toughest question. It's hard to say one in particular. I mean, sometimes I got asked one question sort of probing further into the proprietary nature of the technology, and I had to just say, I'm sorry, I'm not able to share. Aside from that, it's a little bit more difficult for me to field questions related to business development. But during the presentation itself, I don't believe I had any of those. Just during some of the roundtable discussions, it's a bit more challenging to talk business development, especially with such an early stage startup. So I think if you can kind of have an imaginary timeline for your company, that could help with some of the discussions or potential questions.
Brilliant. Any other questions from the audience for Jack?
Oliver, I have another question for you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that there's 10 teams, I believe, that are chosen as finalists to go to Eli Lilly and do their presentation. How are those 10 teams chosen? Is it specifically Eli Lilly who chooses them, or like does Nucleate say, oh, these are the companies that we think you'll like and choose them?
Yep. So Eli Lilly has access to all the applications, but we go through those applications initially ahead of time. We interview teams, we reach out and we evaluate them. And then we put together a short list of usually 20 to 30 companies that we then send to Lilly. And that's usually where they get more involved in giving some feedback. And we work with them to kind of identify the top 10.
Okay.
Question. Oh, go ahead.
Is it a deck that we could use as an example?
Deck that we can use as an example. I don't have one. I could reach out and we could ask a couple of the past teams if they'd be willing for their deck to be shared, but I don't have one currently. What I would say is there's a lot of really great resources and templates online, in particular Pillar, which is a VC company in Boston. They have this great thing they call a founder playlist with a lot of amazing resources, including advice and templates for like how to make good pitch decks. My suggestion is like no longer than 15 slides, ideally 10. Have it be crisp, have it be clean, have every single title of your slides be the most relevant sentence that you're trying to say about the slides. Like if you cover up if you just read the titles of your slides in order, it should make a story that is coherent that you could tell someone and they would get it. And then everything below the slide title supports the slide title. Obviously, you want to have data, you want to have a market slide, a solution slide, a team slide, and a competitive slide. And if you take a look at the Pillar VC founder playlist, I can link that for you guys. They've got some good resources. Okay, there was a question from Malika. How far in the future does Eli Lilly want you to have the plan laid out? Do they want to see what you will do beyond product one? What the expansion potential of the company is?
I think not for the pitch itself. I think how you can use the award money is a good starting point, and then having some idea of where you would like to go in the future without having every specific detail figured out is pretty good. But for us also, I had in vitro data, so I had to sort of speculate what I would imagine in vivo, sort of allude to the experiments that I would like to do, and kind of speak to clinically how viable it is. So I think if you can kind of see into the future and have a few things to say as to why this is going to be viable, that's good, without saying, after this, we're going to talk to investor X and request this much money, which will cover this budget. You don't need details like that.
Great. Okay, well, I will stay on till 12:30, but we're going to give Jack some time back on his calendar. Thank you so much, Jack. Congratulations again on graduating and defending your PhD. Congratulations on the company. I am very excited to see what happens in the future. And as always, if you need any support from the Nucleate community, feel free to just email me directly, and happy to do whatever I can. So thank you so much for spending some time today here with us to tell people about this very exciting opportunity.
Thanks so much, Oliver, and I'm really grateful for everything that you do. You're the man.
Awesome. Thanks, dude.
Bye.